delighted to be here and to be participating in what has been an ongoing collaboration between the Metropolitan Opera and the Guggenheim. Some of you may be wondering, perhaps, if the grand old Metropolitan Opera has committed a foolhardy act by presenting a new opera about the dystopian world of chat rooms on the internet, written by a composer who was not yet 30 when he received his commission.
Now he's well past 30. It's a slow-moving ship.
These things take time.
Yep.
And whose previous collaborations have included Bjork and a group called Grizzly Bear. Please don't worry, though. We're not attempting to stage our very own immolation scene. Although producing new work in itself is inherently risky, is a risky act, we know that opera runs a far greater risk if it doesn't expand its repertoire with original work, particularly a new work such as this one that explores today's society. If we were to rely solely on its past glories, opera would face an uncertain future. Therefore, we can't be afraid of taking risks when it comes to advancing our art form. So when the curtain goes up next Monday night on the first Met work to appear on our stage that was commissioned under my watch, we hopefully will not be leaping from the frying pan into the fire. Although the Met will certainly be sizzling with the thrill of the unveiling of a new work. It was actually 5 years ago when Andre Bishop, the head of Lincoln Center Theater, and I enthusiastically agreed to Nico's idea of an opera with the decidedly 21st century setting of the internet. With me this evening are three of the most important creative adventurers who are responsible for seeing Two Boys through to its opening next Monday and beyond: the composer, the conductor, and the stage director. To my left is composer Nico Muhly, one of the most gifted and successful of composers of this generation or any generation, now 32. Nico.
Thanks very much.
Now 32. Nico has composed works for major orchestras and ballet companies, as well as for films and the theater. In fact, his music for The Glass Menagerie can be heard on Broadway right now. His influences include Stravinsky, Britten, and the choral music of the 16th and 17th century. And his choral writing for Two Boys is a revelation of unity and individuality all at the very same time. Please welcome Nico Muhly.
Hi. Thanks.
To Nico's left is David Robertson, the music director of the St. Louis Symphony since 2005, who is one of the leading symphonic conductors in the world. He is also proficient in opera, having conducted La Scala, the Munich Opera, Paris Opera, and of course the Met, where he has conducted Mozart, Bizet, Britten, and now Muhly. We are very fortunate that he has agreed to conduct this new opera. Please welcome David Robertson. I don't know if it says something about conductors and general managers, but I see we're both wearing ties, but
the transitions in sartorial terms, I think.
Exactly.
Anyone who has been to Broadway or the Met is familiar with the work of director Bartlett Sher, one of the theater and opera world's most virtuosic directors. A Tony Award winner in 2008 for his direction of South Pacific, he has also directed The Barber of Seville, amongst other operas at the Met. He has been involved in the creative process of Two Boys from the very beginning of the commissioning and workshop process, working in close tandem with Nico Muhly and the librettist Craig Lucas. Please welcome Bartlett Sher. So before we begin our conversation to explore the first grand opera, to delve into the seamy side of the internet chat rooms, I should say, we're going to play a trailer, a video trailer that represents the subject and the music. I guess it's only an opera about the internet could produce a trailer. The visual material is created by 59 Productions, the remarkable video artists who have created all of the projections for Two Boys and whose work should be familiar to Met audiences for other work that they've done on our stage. If you could please play the trailer. So this clearly is not the typical Metropolitan Opera. Nico, we should start with you, if we may, since this was all your idea, which I remember in 2007 when Andre Bishop and I met with you for the first time in my office, and we asked you what you would like to write an opera about. You had several ideas up your sleeve, and this was one of them. Can you tell us what made you think of this as an opera?
Well, I grew up sort of in a, basically the internet and I are loosely the same age, and I became sort of a teenager while it was the very beginnings of people beginning to have connections at home. So when I was maybe 12 or 13, it was only academics had it, and maybe there'd be one shared family computer, and that all very slowly started to kind of expand. And when I was in high school, it really felt like you were in the sort of wild west of the net. I mean, parents didn't really have the skills to talk to you about what you should and should not be looking at, and the idea of talking to people seemed sort of natural. And I became sort of obsessed with the interpersonal possibilities of this, and sure enough, 10 years later, you started to see these stories of people pretending to be other people online, or people pretending to have cancer online and asking for money, and all these things have the sort of hoaxes that have no specific outcome. And I encountered the story of this young boy who got stabbed, and it turns out that he was sort of in some way involved in a very complicated series of interlocking relationships online, which to me felt like a very operatic thing. Anyway, I mean, it's essentially, I've been saying a lot in the last couple of weeks that using costume for personal or sexual or political gains is essentially a major mechanism that drives opera. I mean, you see it in Così, you see it in Giulio Cesare, you see it in many operas. I mean, even in The Ring, there's this idea that you can manipulate people through disguise.
Can you, obviously most people don't know the story yet, can you just give an outline of the plot without giving away the ending? This is, for once we have an opera where people don't know the ending, and we want to keep it that way for the time being.
The essential outline of the story, there are two stories that the opera treats. So there's a boy is stabbed, number one, and it seems pretty obvious that an older boy did it. And it's the job of a policewoman to figure out what happened. And she begins sort of over the course of a week-long interrogation of the older boy, realizes that the older boy has been being spoken at by a variety of different people online, all of whom have sort of overlapping but different goals. So that world is unfolding, and at the same time, we sort of get involved in her life a little bit and understand what it's like to be an analog creature sort of confronted with a digital mystery, which again, I think is so much of, so much of this sort of the sense of displacement in traditional operas where someone, it's the stranger who can see the real truth behind the thing.
There is it has a definite romantic side to it as well.
Right, of course, and it's interesting because in as much as it's about or takes place on the internet, the half of it also takes place in a very sort of mundane police station, and it's the idea that these things that happen in digital space, when they sort of tear through the membrane into real life, that's when things get really, really interesting and complicated.
Bart, you were involved in the development of this from the very beginning, working with Nico and with Craig, Lucas librettist. Can you talk about the development of the piece?
Yeah, it's been 5 years. And like developing all these things, it's sort of taken place in 3 big stages. So stage 1 was a series of 4 workshops that we did both here and in London.
This was, I should explain, this is a co-production with the English National Opera.
Yeah, with the English National Opera. So the first workshop was just like hear it and see what the heck it is. And then there was some rewrites in between. So there was a lot of development of the script to go into production at ENO, which happened 2 summers ago. We did our last workshop before ENO in London with the people there so we could begin to prepare production. Then did a full production there in the summer of 2011. And that production went pretty well. And a lot of the challenges of it were figuring out, the piece goes, it's a fairly layered narrative between the reality of the police detective figuring out the crime, what happened to the boy who met a lot of people online, and bouncing into the web itself, where it explodes into lots of people talking all at the same time. So you have all these different layers of narrative happening. And I think audiences, luckily, are used to more complex narrative now than they ever have been, because we're used to communicating in so many ways. Then after E&O, we did another workshop here at the Met, where we did one more set of rewrites leading to that. And then since then, a final set of rewrites to the script we have now going into this last production. And between E&O and the Met were changes in the projection design, some of the physical design, and sort of development of the piece. The cast at E&O is actually completely different than the cast here. And so it's one of those things where it was sort of our relatively expensive out-of-town tryout. Don't tell anybody in London, we call them out of town. But so that led to this being the production we have now, which is really, I think the script is in absolutely the best shape it's ever been. And, you know, we're getting close.
So we still have another week.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
In exactly a week is curtain.
Yeah,
by the
we
way,
can
just
still
to-
rewrite the ending.
Not that we're counting. So, David, you came relatively late to the process because there already was a conductor for the London run, and we approached you. I guess was it in 2010 or 11, I think.
Yeah, 2010 actually. So the London production hadn't taken place yet. And so in fact, you gave me some ideas about the story, but there were no materials that I could have, really. And
that's why you didn't agree at first.
well, no, it's actually what I did was I said, hang on a minute, because I know a little bit about the composer, but I needed to find out more. And so I essentially just listened to everything that Nico's written and will, you know, he was a precocious youth, and still is, but I really sort of did research on lots of different levels, and I thought, okay, this is the kind of project that looks like it would be really interesting. And then I met with Nico to talk about things and things that had occurred to me, and we had a nice interaction.
So, and is it fair to say that, I know you have a very broad repertoire, but you have done a lot of contemporary music.
Yeah, and I've also done premieres of operas, and I've worked with composers who have written their first opera before. So I know that
It's one of the reasons why we came to you, actually.
You know, it's one of the things is that the creative process, especially for the performing artist, we're often called interpreters, and I think it's not incorrect to make the analogy with literary interpreters, where you have something that's in this extraordinary language, and essentially what happens is that Nico writes the musical equivalent in ciphers on a page of a butterfly, and we're supposed to be able to do the right thing so that when the audience members are there and they suddenly hear the music, they go, oh my gosh, look at that beautiful butterfly. And if we do this correctly, then that means that we've made the proper translation and nothing has been lost. And that requires a great deal of flexibility and understanding.
And I should point out, not to make you seem incredibly old, but David was a childhood sort of hero of mine. I mean, all of the recordings that I really loved were his, and he's also as a conductor interesting for me because in a lot of cases. Conductors specialize in music that all kind of sounds the same way, and some of the music that he conducts sounds like my music, and some of the music that he conducts sounds nothing like my music at all. And he has a sort of voracious way of dealing with all of it, and that to me is actually really important because it you know, in as much as my language exists slightly in its own little world, it's good to have an interpreter come from a different background and with different experiences and be able to sort of, you know, tweak out things that I wouldn't have. Right.
Well, no, because this is the thing: it's if you look at literary, someone who's translating Bulgakov and Mandelstam shouldn't take the same approach, even though technically it's the same language as Tolstoy or Pushkin. Is that you need to try and find out what's really essential in the process. And this is what's been so great about working with Bart, because Bart and I met, I guess 2 years ago, really the first time, to start talking about these things, is that really in the process, both directors, the musical director as well as the stage director, are really trying to bring the interpreters to the best understanding of how they can inhabit these roles and bring the things out. And we actually kind of have this pincer movement to get them to do it, is that he'll say something in terms of the physical, visual incarnation of these people, and then I'll come from the side flank and say something about the musical. And then in the end, what you do is you allow people to create something which is extraordinary and unique to them.
This is the utopian relationship between director and conductor.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we did manufacture a little bit of stress today in front of the cast,
Yeah,
just
right.
so that they would think it was real.
We should also say one of the crazy things that I've learned, spending a lot of time at the Met in the last 5 or 6 years, is that actually casting is an amazing part of the collaborative process. And we were just saying before, we're incredibly lucky because this show is really, really well cast. And so then that pincer process becomes, not an unpleasant one. It's sort of,
It's an overwhelmingly huge operation of all these forces coming together between intelligent musical dramaturgy and directing and book writing and casting and
scheduling,
creative thing, and then
and the technical
today,
realization
we had
of all of it.
rehearsal, which was just insane, because it's sort of all colliding at one time.
right. So we're trying to keep our mind on the story, and we're trying to keep our mind on the technical things, and then meanwhile I'm in the fussing with the marimbist about the mallets that he's using in figure F, and it all has to happen in 18 seconds.
Yeah.
It's a state of hopefully controlled chaos. But the Bart,
Glamorous panic is actually
glamorous panic. That sounds good. So why don't you describe a little bit about the production, Bart? So,
Yeah.
And we have a couple of images that were shot, I think, today recently.
Essentially, it's what we would call these things is for lack of a better term, an operating system for the opera. The operating system consists of 6 24-foot towers, which are essentially 3 stories high, that are covered in projection material, scrim. So they're all moving projection surfaces. They're all pushed by hand, so there's 4 guys per tower. And they can move and create, there's something like 50 locations in the piece, so it's constantly shifting and moving. So these projection towers, they're also a chorus delivery system. That's a different story. You can load them up with chorus and people, and you can put things in them, and you can move them all the time. So they can both represent spaces in which the piece happens, an office, the house of the detective, or a place of a person being questioned, or a hospital room. They can also be surfaces which then, when projected on from a million different directions, explode into lots of places. So you see this great deal of depth in these moving platforms, and that essentially is what creates things. So there's some of the projection images, a bedroom, but behind that is a large surface. You can't really feel in a lot of these pictures the kind of scale of these towers, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of them. And it's originally, the event happened somewhere in northern England, but it's mostly what you'd call like a somewhat urban landscape.
But it's set in an industrial city in England
Industrial
in 2001.
city in England,
The
Manchester.
early days
Yeah.
of the internet.
So it's very gray, and gray's good for projection because you can turn it any color. And so it's able to shift a lot. The chorus is, and there's a group of 60 chorus, 12 dancers, 20 supers, and 10 principals. So they're all sort of shifting together at the same time and kind of in a dance from location to location and from inside one bit of the world to another. So if 2 people are speaking online, you have 2 people downstage, plus you have to roll all their chat behind them, plus any other people that might be speaking. So it's this kind of weird mix and dance.
One of the challenges one of the compositional systems that governs the piece, and Craig Lucas and I sort of agreed on this from the first minute, was that we didn't want any spatial transitions. So there would never be like a sort of 5-minute Wagnerian landscape change. So instead you slam right into the next scene always. So with that sets up actually an enormous challenge musically for David to sort of manipulate these tempi and make sure that everything's fluid but changed, and then also for Bart, of course, to keep the system in motion.
So within a 20-page section, it will start as a question and answer in a police station, go into the bedroom of the boy where he was online, then into that bedroom will come some girl he's talking to online, then the detective will walk into that bedroom and bust up and say, no, I don't buy anything you're telling me about who you talked to online. Then the mother will show up, then he'll say, no, look, really, this is what happened, and he'll go online and 60 people will start singing in some version of Thomas Tallis mixed with the naughtiest things you've ever heard in your whole life. So it's kind of a mixture that way. And you end up with this kind of dancing world, which we're now capable of in our own consciousness, of balancing a lot of realities at once so that we can be online and talking to somebody. Or anybody who has children now knows that they are like balancing 6 realities at the same time. None of them focused on anything you're saying, by the way. But it's that kind of thing in which you're sort of trying to reproduce the new way that we now intersect with each other.
And we should add that the designers who you work with are your regular wonderful collaborators,
yeah.
Michael
Jurgen, Kathy Zuber, Don Holder, and 59, who done this amazing job with the projections. So we're all kind of in a bit of a dance with a new
It's not
way.
unusual, though, for you. I mean, I've noticed that when you do productions at the Met and elsewhere, that you like to keep your options open by having such fluid scenery.
Yes.
That's sort of your trademark.
I don't like to plan too well.
Bart likes to make a mess and then clean it up later.
Yeah, no, the issue is being able to have a lot of fluidity so that you can build something that has its own kind of beautiful autonomous logic and you can shift the realities. Plus, this particular text switches so quickly from reality to reality that if you didn't have a way of switching from one to the other quickly, there may be 150 different ways of doing it, but we have all of them available to us at any one time, and we just keep shifting them. We would do less of that in Le Lizère, but even in Le Lizère, there's a bit of a way of making some adjustments that way.
Well, one of the anxieties with this sort of any police story is you have to sort of gauge very delicately precisely how much backstory you need to know about the people who are investigating the thing. And if you think about great police dramas, like Prime Suspect or whatever, there's an amount that we get to know about Helen Mirren, and there's an amount that we don't. And there's a sort of control of that, and I think that was the thing that we really needed to develop the most from the London performance, was that she was a guide, but we didn't really understand what was motivating a lot of her agita. So, and then also when musically, what that helped me do was basically she could have there were more opportunities for traditional expressive material, and she wasn't just like this constant sort of shark moving through the space, taking notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anybody knows, like if you really think about it and you've ever watched Law & Order, you realize that you have no idea anything about Sam Waterston's past at all. Like those characters have no backstory whatsoever. They show up each week and they ask questions of other people who are going through terrible circumstances. If they have a wife, a child, a blah, blah. I mean, that's one tradition of how to do detective stories. And we kind of started there, but realized that in order for it to have a little higher stakes, we needed to know more about her past. So one of the biggest developments in that character was to provide, I mean, for lack of a better term, a backstory, which intersects with the story of the thing as to why she wouldn't have wanted to work in the juvenile area, why she wouldn't be interested in young kids, why she was trying to avoid that kind of detective work, and then being pulled into it and the effects it has on her. A little bit more in the John le Carré tradition, where as a crime goes along, it begins to push up and transform the people who are brought into it. And it's that kind of story.
It's all about making her into a credible, believable, and sympathetic character.
Yeah, and also how certain things you can't avoid in that kind of work, how it might start to change you as much as you're helping affect circumstances as they move forward.
You know, we talked earlier a little bit about the choral music and how influential early choral music has been on you as a composer in this piece and other pieces you've written. And we have today from the rehearsal, we have a little audio recording of the rehearsal that we thought we'd play. Since the music, the choral music, as beautiful as that aria and other arias are, it's really, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think it's from my take, it's the choral writing that is the soul of this piece in a way, because it represents all the diverse voices of the internet.
One of the things I was trying to do in assembling the system that sort of governs how the chorus works is exactly that you can give them sort of static chords, and then each singer individually is instructed. There's a sort of list of things that they're allowed to say, and so what you get is, you know, a very traditional chord structure, but with this shimmer inside of it, and that to me was the way that I was trying to be evocative of you know, the online world was not through synthesizers or not through something that was going to sound outdated, but instead through something quite analog. And so in my mind, it has to do with sort of Pentecostal traditions. It has to do with like Meredith Monk, and it has to do with, you know, I would say a lot. I mean, there's the thing that I always think of is music for Whit Sunday, music for Pentecost. There's a wonderful Tallis motet called Loque Banto Variis Linguis, and it's this fabulous thing with a million little ornaments all kind of hovering on the same note. That's sort of the effect that we get here.
And the idea is that there are thousands and thousands, millions, countless voices on the
Right.
internet, and this music is in a way meant to represent
Right.
that wild kind of.
And what do we have, like a minute or something of the?
Yeah, it's a minute direct from.
Is it literally today?
Direct from today's rehearsal.
High tech.
We'll see if it works. Can you play the audio tape, please? So I'm curious for David to explain how it is to work. Have you ever worked with a chorus at the Met on such intricate details of parts as that?
No, although, you know, the chorus historically has played such an important role because they allow for the global viewpoint. And so one of the things that when Nico and I met, and we talked a great deal about this, precisely the kind of aria and the things that are being expressed, what I think is the strength of the opera is that a lot of this kind of buried emotion that we see coming up through the course of the work in Alice Coote's character, Anne Dawson, is perfect for opera, because in opera there's this constant sort of battle between the text and the subtext, where we will hear, and all of the great opera composers have used this, where you say one thing but you sing another, or you sing one thing which is perfectly normal and yet the orchestra is doing something else that's different. And so this, for example, the choral example that you heard, where when you're aware of what some of the things they are saying in the chorus, and this extraordinary sort of music that binds us up to human expression and interaction from centuries of this kind of experience, all comes together to make something in which you you allow us to hear lots of different possibilities in the same music. And so one of the things that's been tricky, particularly because Nico has given so much freedom, is to understand that when you have, say, a line of text to say, that it's not always the same speed. And so what you need to do is, in a sense, validate each individual chorus member so that every single one, although they are doing the quote-unquote same thing at the same time, are all making sure that their individual part comes out with enough integrity so that the blend of all of them is exactly like this idea of all of these different people in various different chat rooms. And it's no different than the type of work you would do with an orchestra where you have a solo violin and gradually the rest of the violin section comes in, and you don't want the rest of the violins to play like some sort of automatons. You want them to actually bring their own human quality to the way they play, which is in the end what creates the beauty of the whole thing.
But each chorus member has a slightly different part.
Absolutely, and this is the thing, is that you need to really rely on their intelligence. And Bart's been very helpful in this. Is that I'll give musical direction or musical motivation, but he'll then also give detail in terms of the story or what he's trying to bring across. And so what that means is that then all of a sudden people aren't simply following instructions by a composer or a conductor or a director, but they're actually inhabiting what it is, and you can feel this when they're on stage. The chorus is a real presence in this, and they also end up mirroring all of the people who are online.
It's also, I mean, it's this weird question: what it actually is the internet, and what does it sound like? And when you're on the computer and you're connecting and you're seeing all these people, or I mean, not even if it's a chat room, but even if it's just comments or if it's a blog or it's something else, they create this sense of connecting or community, and it's fast, and it can go to all these, you can go anywhere if you type the right words in, you can go to any place you want. And Nico's more confident about doing that than I might be, but it's one of those things where it is, our consciousness has changed, and then the question is, you have these old traditions, which David's beautifully pulled out of the chorus, and then they create the sound of what does that sound like. I think in the Renaissance it would have been the music of the spheres, or it would have been something else you're trying to approximate. But now there's this other thing, this other hum that sort of connects everybody, and the choruses are trying to approximate the scale of that. The interesting part is that it's both sacred and profane at the same time. So the sound of it is both beautiful and somewhat terrifying, depending on where you are.
In terms of the individual.
Depending on, it reflects in some ways whoever you are, and what you're looking for or afraid of may come back at you bigger than you expect.
Yeah. There are a lot of moments where I wanted the chorus to feel like a sort of a gesture of infiniteness, where it's not just 60 people, but it could be, you know, 1 million people. And what sometimes what they're asked to do is just create, they're off stage and they just create a sort of like susurration around the sound. And it gets, as I was saying before, I'm interested in those moments where, you know, something that's been contained online spills over into the real world. And in the second act, we realize that basically, like, this teenage boy's life is a vessel that's about to just pour out. And so the chorus sort of encroaches into the audio space. So, you know, he's having a sensible conversation with his mother, and then there's this, you just hear this kind of buzzing women's voices, you know, way, you know, on Amsterdam Avenue. Actually, I mean, one thing I should just point out about fake people on the internet is this story is so implausible when you think about it, right? And then you realize that every week, every day, every minute, people are very, very intelligent people are getting duped. Like
that Nigerian prince who wrote to me
just last
week. And I sent him all my material.
Exactly, to whom you sent all the money. But there was this physicist. Remember, like 3 weeks ago in the Times, there was an article about this physicist who definitely thought that he was, you know, communicating with a Brazilian supermodel, and that they were going to meet up for sexy times, and actually he was like smuggling cocaine for her, which actually she didn't exist. Or there was this football player.
When I was working on the score, and at the very first musical rehearsal, I said, look, this is probably the closest one has ever seen a successful segue or a successful following on from the kind of vocal presentation of a story that we really only know from one other opera, and that's Pelléas and Mélisande, where so much of the actual telling of the story with the voice is not done through classic operatic means. And it's a fabulous way of being able to relate this story in such a way that it never folds over into being something antiquated but remains quite modern. And one of the things that's fascinating, and that was a real shock today for the soloists on stage, even for the chorus, was to hear just how incredibly broad are the palette of colors that Nico uses to paint this picture. And so many times there will be these changes which on the piano sound relatively different in terms of the harmony, but are as though you've gone down a wormhole and you're suddenly in a different galaxy in terms of the actual sound picture that you're presented with as an audience member. And so much of this kind of working of the voice and the orchestral texture and the choral texture together is what one does to create something that really is unlike any other sort of opera score that I've ever come across before. And part of the real joy for me is bringing out these kinds of incredible subtexts where you can see all sorts of things happening on stage, and the music is constantly tempting you to go in lots of different directions. And Bart is so good at picking up on this, where he keeps people from going into operatic poses, but actually gives it the space for you as an audience member to be really following and asking all of these questions, which are constantly beckoning to you in the score. And that's something that one doesn't get when they're the piano and presented in this way.
And one of the things that we've been doing, and even before we got into music rehearsals, I mean, David is great at identifying not just things that can be teased out, but also he was really great at helping me really craft the thing for this pit. And the Met Orchestra is amazing, and the hall is amazing, and the sound is amazing. And we in London, basically I was very, very happy with how it was orchestrated, but there were a couple of sort of missed opportunities, I'll call them. I was under 30, so it was. so then Grandma went back with the sagesse of old age. No, but having a collaborator as sort of attuned to these little subtleties is great, because that is the way that I'm trying to work, is in this. It's not, all right, now here we have the aria that's going to have this traditional romantic structure and it's going to have this kind of payoff. Instead, what you really have is this constant kind of liquid music that is sometimes ostinato-based and other times totally not, and subtle shifts in orchestration and it's an odd thing.
No, and one of the things that's really been fun is that in those moments where the music seems to be saying to you, okay, settle down, folks, this is just your classic opera aria, Bart is able to do these things on the stage where you're going, no, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. And so there's this constant feeling really right up until the very end of the piece, where we find out what's really happened in the story. And even then, the choral finale that finishes with all of the soloists and all of the characters from the entire opera on stage, really leaves us in this wonderfully open-ended state. And we understand that although this is set in a time period relatively recently, it is, this is the world we live in.
Hearing David describe how he's finding these aspects of the score and bringing them out, are you always in agreement with that, or is he discovering things that you didn't even know were there? Obviously, you wrote them, so you must know they're there.
I mean, I have been always in agreement with them. It's also, I mean, at a certain point, the piece becomes his. I mean, I'm sort of chilled out about what exactly it is that I need to be doing, and I think the sort of motto for this production has just been "keep on task," which is also a line from the opera. But that's really we're trying to tell a story, and anything that can no matter how subtle, again, the marimba mallet, or this one viola will pop up with here an octave and a little softer, whatever, tiny details. I welcome. I welcome it. If you guys have anything you want to add, just call me.
No, but what's cool has been that Bart will come with Craig's words to the piano, and I will come with the full score to the piano, and we'll have the singers, and we'll do it musically, and I'll say something, and Bart will completely second it, and it's right there in the score. Or Bart will say something that's coming from the drama, and I'll say, yes, and that's when you do, and I point to the passage in the score. And this is really the part that's fascinating when you get a work like this that is successful on many different angles, is that you don't stop finding these things. Even today, there was one point where in the notes, there's an actual text that comes from real life, and you'll recognize it in the opera, I won't give it away, of a certain congressman who was texting various things, and the texts are lifted verbatim. And there's this marvelous musical metaphor where when you're texting, the text doesn't show up. It's not sometimes like in different places on the internet or on a screen where you have the text and then it's gone. The text remains while you're typing your other text. And so Nico's found this marvelous way that instead of singing, that's good, you need a massage, which is what you would sing, the vocalist sings, that's good, you need a massage, while the other person is ostensibly singing their typed text in response to that. And so there are these constant notes going on, and it was great to see the vocalist suddenly realize, oh, that's why I'm doing that.
But
and then,
of course, I stole from Perrotin by way of Steve Reich. So
sure.
we're all kind of,
Al Gore invented the internet. What
exactly,
do you want?
Exactly. Is he coming, by the way? Where's he at?
Yes. From my point of view, it's, I would say a week ago last Saturday, we ran through the opera in the room.
The room downstairs.
Yeah,
not the
and it was beautiful, and it was all layered, and it was in place. And we haven't found our way back there since we got on stage. It's interesting to be kind of quietly sitting here and cogently describing it, because if you'd seen us 6 hours ago running like mad people up and down the aisles, screaming about change this and look at that and do that, we're sort of in that weird place where the orchestra was moving through the music for the first time since the Sitzprobe. The singers were trying to hear themselves on the stage. They got through the first act twice. The projection guys were trying madly to put together text that was on. So there's all these forces kind of colliding in a 3-hour period as we try to make sense.
I mean, it's crazy that people make operas. It's an absolutely insane miracle that this is happening.
So where we have to be is, we're in a really good place because each iteration gets better and better. So the first act was a little bit insane, and then the second act had settled down. But you have to make a lot of very quick decisions as you're pushing your way through with a pretty distinct and strong plan all the way till 6 o'clock on Monday before we start.
So
There's a plan.
We should explain a little bit about the process further. That today, what happens is in the room, which Bart referred to, which is on sea level, and in the early stage rehearsals, sea level is 2 levels below, 3 levels below the stage. And in the first week of stage rehearsals, Bart is basically in charge of trying to get everything working on the stage.
Yeah, just get a shape for the whole thing in place.
And then today, in this final week, everything changes. And now the orchestra is in the pit.
It's David's show.
And this is David's show.
Yeah.
And Bart has to try to follow and
which is great because we have a lot to catch up on. So we're following him. He's got really important work to do with the orchestra finding its way, but we're working, as we call, on top of him. So all the people are working, and so the lighting designers had a couple of days is now, refocusing and reprogramming and doing things and finding people, and things have shifted. And so I say it in what sounds like chaotic terms. Actually, it is somewhat chaotic.
It is chaotic.
But it's sort of a controlled version of how to push together this thing, which is a very high labor, very intense process into, especially something that's technologically trying to express the reality of the internet. So it's interesting. It's fun.
If I may, David has very kindly described this work in comparing it to Peleus and Melisson. So we hope the music critics agree with you. But if you, Bart and Nico, if you had something you wanted that you wish the audience would take away from this piece, what would it be?
Oh, you go first. I'll think about it.
I would say it's a sort of it's a simple thing, which is that I'm trying to tell a very, very old story in a slightly new way, but it's a very sort of fundamental and simple story about sort of longing and wanting to sort of reach out and connect with someone, and it kind of doesn't matter who, in a weird way. And that's something that's been going on since the beginning of time, and that now we have this kind of slightly heightened and anxiety-producing and beautiful and romantic and dangerous way to do it. So I guess it's sort of...
It's a love story.
It's a love story, yeah. Right.
I think, for me, it's essentially adolescent longing, youthful longing, which turns into crisis, and trying to find in our children, since I have children who are of the age of people in the show, trying to find a way in which, as we grow, what kind of different rooms we can walk into and discover and understand our longings in different ways they're manifested, and in ways in which we now communicate. So it's a lot about adolescent crisis, and
like so much of drama.
Yeah,
like
and so that seems to me similar to, I don't know, Romeo and Juliet. I don't know, As You Like It. I don't know, it's sort of in the kind of tradition of like, how do we grow up, and what kind of things do we discover in that? So,
well, thank you very much. I hope the members of the audience this evening will join us and find out for themselves.
See you in a week.
And thank you so much. Thank you.
Well done.